Join me right now, the chairman of the Stagwell Group, CEO, and the Harris Poll chairman, Mark Penn. Mark, it's great to have you. Thanks very much for being here. Merry Christmas, happy holidays. You always have your finger right on the pulse of what people are thinking. Your reaction to President Biden wanting to run again if he's in good health, and Donald Trump likely running again as well.
Well, I was really surprised that President Biden put doubt in whether or not he's going to run. Leadership rarely does that because you never want to be seen as a potential lame duck. But let me tell you, as a practical matter, in our most recent polls, he's polling under 40% in Democratic primaries among Democrats. That's unprecedented for a sitting president. So a majority of Democrats would not support Joe Biden for re-election right now, unless he turns his presidency around, health or not. And as to Donald Trump, he's in a somewhat better position. He's getting about 47% of Republicans against a matchup of other candidates. Not a majority, down a little bit, but way in the lead. So he certainly has even more potential right now if you look at the numbers of getting the nomination.
Well, a poll from your company earlier this month showed that Donald Trump has the advantage if the presidential election were held today. President Trump coming in with a 48% vote and Joe Biden at 45%, right?
Absolutely. If the election were reheld today, Donald Trump, quite surprisingly, would win that election in the popular vote, let alone the Electoral College. So I think but that, as you can see, what's really happened is President Biden's numbers have collapsed. He's underwater in almost every area of presidential responsibility.
Yeah, well, there's another report showing that polling has Republicans possibly flipping 2 Senate seats in Georgia and Nevada. What does the 22 midterms look like to you right now, Mark?
Well, again, you want to be careful, a year out. But if you read today's polls, it is a Republican wave. It's undeniable when you read these polls to see that the Democrats are seen as too far to the left, a lot of opposition to virtually all the programs, the president underwater. And when you're in power and immigration crime, as you just pointed out, almost 80% see it as increasing, immigration out of control. When you have all of these problems unhandled, inflation in the economy on top of that, you're going to expect to face really tough midterms, maybe some of the toughest in history, unless this administration turns itself around.
What about Joe Manchin? What do you make of what just took place? Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell telling Fox News yesterday that the Senate would, quote, feel a lot more comfortable on our side, and we welcome Joe Manchin if he wants to switch. Do you think he would switch?
Well, I think what Joe Manchin did was a classic profiles in courage in the John F. Kennedy sense, someone who put what he believed was the interests of the country above his party. I don't think Joe Manchin will switch. I think that he is a lifelong Democrat. I think that's in his blood. I'm a little surprised, given that fact, how the attacks have been from Democrats. I think that's a mistake. Maybe he'd consider going as an independent. I highly doubt he'd become a Republican, although the governor of West Virginia did exactly that.
Yeah, but it's become commonplace, right, Mark? I mean, if you don't go along with the extreme left's narrative on anything, you get attacked publicly on Twitter. And they went as far as, following Christian cinema into the ladies' room. They camped out outside Joe Manchin's houseboat, protested, tried to really make them uncomfortable because they weren't going along with the narrative.
Yeah, I think Joe Manchin has indicated that those sort of tactics, and he's been very direct. If you think those sort of tactics are going to work against him, you'll be sorry. Look, and this whole notion that it's about 1 or 2 senators, it's about 51 or 52 senators, and it is about kind of national popular opinion. This bill should never have been put together as a bill of this huge size without any real public debate. They should go back and take something like the child credit, try to negotiate a bipartisan, child credit moving forward, do what was done on the infrastructure bill. That's what America really wants, not to have one half of one party's ideology, passed, in the country by the narrowest of votes, which they can't even get.
Well, it's a good point, Mark, because when you look at the breakdown of the Senate and the House, they don't have a mandate at all. What do they have? About 3 more votes in terms of support for this on the House. And in the Senate, it's 50-50. That's hardly a mandate.
Well, not only is it not a mandate, it's not what the public wants to see. The public wants to see, as we had with the infrastructure bill, at least substantial bipartisan input and negotiation. One-party bills are rarely good bills for the country. Sometimes they are, but most of the time, the country wants a two-party solution, and Joe Biden promised unity, and that means negotiating back and forth here.
No, we haven't seen a lot of that. Mark, great to see you. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and we'll see you in the new year.
Same to you, Maria. Thank you so much.